Well, we are not interested in escalating, violence or tension with anyone here. It is the Syrian regime that has started a brutal military campaign against its own people. We have done everything in our capacity to use our diplomatic channels to convince the regime there, and we have not resorted to any sort of violence or military action, and we are against any type of war in the region. That's why our response to the downing of our jet fighter has been very calculated and calm. But as I mentioned in my presentation, this should not be seen as a sign of weakness. It's the Syrian regime that is responsible, of course, for this state of affairs. Of course, we will do everything in our capacity not to let any type of, military fighting, confrontations take place, in our borders, even though we've been fighting against PKK terrorism for now 30 years almost. But of course, we are against that kind of military solution, because military solution, at the end of the day, is not a solution. And in regards to the zero problem with neighbors policy, of course, this is something that we've implemented and we are still sticking to. It is a principle with which we develop relations with countries, and we have made a lot of gains. I mean, until the Arab Spring started and the Syrian crisis began, we have had excellent relationship with Syria, not only with the Syrian state, but also with the Syrian people, various Syrian agencies, that is NGOs, communities, people, journalists, businessmen, and those relations are still there. We have vastly improved our relations with Russia, with Iran, with Greece, those countries that traditionally used to be considered to be part of our national threat perception. Those have changed tremendously. There are, as I mentioned, occasional, time-dependent problems, some policy-related issues here and there, no doubt. But the zero-problem policy still holds, because it is something you can implement with the other side joining in. And we made really great strides through that policy with many, many countries in the Caucasus, in Central Asia, in Africa, and other places. But of course, this does not mean that we paint a pinky picture and just turn a blind eye to the harsh realities on the ground. That's why, in Syria, we have tried for 7 months, almost 7 months, from February of last year until September, to convince President Assad to start a process of reform. And during that time, during those 7 months, our prime minister spoke to Assad 4 times on the phone. He sent our foreign minister twice to Damascus. Many other special envoys went to convince those people not to attack their own people. We have done everything in our capacity, but they didn't listen. So even during that time, if you have followed the events in Turkey, we were under so much pressure for engaging the Syrian regime when they were killing their own people. So, I mean, there is a very delicate balance there one has to keep. But at the end of the day, of course, I believe we are on the right side of history, and we will remain committed to Syrian people's aspirations.
Yes.
Anthony from Turkish Daily Vatan. Two very quick questions. Two very quick questions, Mr. Kalin. Thank you for your time, by the way. Both of them regarding Syria. First question is, Mr. Prime Minister just yesterday clearly stated that the rules of engagement now change. My specific question is, he talked about any military element of the Syrian regime close to the border will be legitimate target. Is there any way you can elaborate on that? What is the closeness of the element, or what kind of action would cause for Turkish forces to respond? And second, very quick question, just to follow up previous question regarding Iran. There is a lot of discussion in Washington, D.C. whether Iran should be part of the solution going forward for the political settlement of the transition in Syria. Do you think that the Iran should be part of the solution going forward, even though Washington obvious administration is opposed right now? Thank you.
In regards to your first question, I'm not a military person, so I'm not an expert on all of these details, like what is the distance, what is the specific concrete threat action, etc. Of course, those are and will be considered by our armed forces. In regards to your second question, of course, from the very beginnings, since this Syrian crisis started, we've been in touch with both Iran and Russia, two countries that clearly support the Syrian regime, and we told them to become part of the solution. If they have an idea, a proposal, a contribution to make, we said, those will be most welcome. Even at this point, with the Friends of Syria groups meetings, but there is another meeting in Geneva this weekend to which Russia will be attending. We welcome that. Our Prime Minister spoke to President Putin just about 2 hours ago, and they went over this issue also, that we should be working together on the Syrian issue. But we have a concrete problem here, and that is the Annan Plan. The Annan Plan was agreed upon by all sides, by all countries, including Russia and others, that is, all the UN Security Council members. But the Annan Plan is not being implemented. Even the monitor mission has been suspended. And this is because of the regime's continuing violence against people. Even the security, safety of the monitors is not being guaranteed by the regime, and they are not free to go around and to do their job. So even the Annan Plan, the 6-point Annan Plan, is not being implemented. So we urge, Russia, Iran, and any other country who can make a contribution to the stopping of violence in Syria, we will welcome that.
Yes, please.
For taking time to talk to us today. My name is Dimitar. I'm from Bulgaria. I'm with the Aspen Institute. And quick question, shifting focus, Turkish perspective to the West and the European Union. Is membership in the European Union still a primary strategic goal for your government and for Turkey as a whole? And then what conditions do you see need to happen in Europe so that that relationship can be strengthened? Thank you.
Well, EU membership still remains a strategic goal for Turkey. There's no change about that. If you look at our policy since 2005, that is when we started the actual negotiations. There are 3 levels, of course, to Turkey's EU accession process. One is the bureaucratic. All the Copenhagen criteria, what they call the acquis communautaire, all the technical details at the bureaucratic level need to be matched with the EU laws, etc. This work has been going on for some time. All the related agencies and ministries, etc., are continuing their work and have been so since 2005. The problem is that when you have one member vetoing the opening or closure of one chapter, then you're stuck. It locks the entire system. And unfortunately, this has been the case with the policies of France under Sarkozy. Now we hope it will change. And also the Greek Cypriot blocking of some of the chapters. So we have about 36 chapters that need to be open and closed, and about half of them are blocked by 2 member countries. So this makes it very difficult for, at the bureaucratic level to move the process forward. The second is the political level. At the political level, if the EU leadership shows more, I think, I don't know what to say, leadership or resolve, to bring Turkey closer to EU and overcome whatever political, social, psychological differences are there, it will immediately find a positive response on our side, because we are not holding up the process. It's the EU. It's the EU bureaucracy. It's the EU political leadership that is holding up Turkey's EU membership. And the third dimension is the psychological. About half of Europe's general public is for Turkey's EU membership, and other half is against. We are trying everything in our capacity to convince those opponents that, in fact, it is in Europe's interest for Turkey to be in there. It's also in our interest, for us to be in the EU. But we need help also from Turkey's friends in Europe who support Turkey's EU membership. We need to have them raise their voice and support so that they can change the political psychology, in Europe in general.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Yes, David Shen, George Washington University. You mentioned in your opening remarks that Turkey has opened 20 new embassies in Africa. One of those embassies is in Mogadishu in Somalia, where Turkey has made a major commitment in the last year and a half, even including a visit to Mogadishu by Prime Minister Erdoğan. What is the driving force in Turkey's decision to make such a commitment to Somalia?
It's twofold. One is political, because Somalia, has an important place in Africa, and the civil war there has caused so much, not only to Somalians, but also Somalia's neighbors. And Somalia is a member of a number of institutions of which Turkey is also a member. Secondly, there is the human side to it. When we went there last year, it was in the month of Ramadan. I was with the Prime Minister. It was really a very kind of moving experience. And when you go there, there were not even like proper roads, for our cars to move around. It was so bad. You have to see it to believe how bad it is. When you went to the tents and camps, and those people, and few people died there while we were there. It was really something emotional also. You have to see it. So in that regard, there was that, and there is that the human side to it. That you cannot turn a blind eye to millions of people dying out of starvation or on the roads, etc. And so we have mobilized our resources, and I think it's been quite successful in terms of raising global consciousness about Somalia. And recently, just 2 weeks ago, we had the UN International Somalia Conference here in Istanbul, where I think major progress was made, even though there are some issues in terms of security, political transition, but in terms of bringing the Somalia issue, at least to the attention of major relevant powers and making some commitments. A lot of progress has been made there. Of course, this is within the larger context of our Africa opening policy. As you rightly mentioned, we are increasing our presence in Africa through embassies, but also through our economic relations, our businessmen, companies, NGOs, journalists, schools, etc. Are expanding their presence in Africa, because we've always had a special relationship with the north of sub-Saharan Africa, the northern Africa, but now we are expanding into sub-Saharan Africa also. We believe it's, it will be a policy of mutual empowerment for us and for Africans.
Final question.
Ahmed, undergraduate student. In 2010, Israel invaded Gaza and caused extensive civilian suffering and damage to Gaza, and also attacked the flotilla. And following that, you severed ties with Israel. Why didn't you invoke Article 4 or Article 5 of the NATO Charter following that unprovoked attack on the flotilla in the Mediterranean Sea? But when Bashar al-Assad and the Syrians bomb your plane, you invoke it. Why the double standard?
Well, it's not a double standard. It's just different orders of issues here. The flotilla was a civilian initiative. It was attacking international waters, and we've lost 9 of our citizens. There was no ground for NATO Article 4 or 5, for that particular incident. But here, one of our fighter jets has been shot down by a third party, another non-NATO member country. So the Article 4 becomes relevant here. But some people have raised this or have made this comparison. The first one was in international waters. This one is in international airspace. So how will Turkey's response be? And of course, our response will again be the same. It will be within international law, but it will be decisive. We've done the same thing with Israel. We have not changed our policy in regards to our 3 conditions, our 3 demands to normalize relations with Israel, which is the apology, compensation, and the lifting of the siege of Gaza. And many people said we will, give up on this over time, etc. No, that position has not changed and will remain the same as long as Israel maintains its policy, its current policy, both over Gaza and also in our bilateral relations.
We have to conclude with that. Ibrahim Bey, we know how busy you are, so thank you very much for your time. Please join me in thanking Dr. Ibrahim Kalin.
Thank you.
Our next panel is in 5 minutes.